Commission for June the 2nd, 2021 are called to order concurrently at 6:09 p.m. Pursuant to Executive Order N-25-20 and N-29-20, members of the Planning Commission and staff are participating in this meeting via video link, Zoom, and/or teleconference. This is not an in-person meeting. Members of the public may observe this meeting on the City of Hawthorne website or on YouTube. We'll now have the Pledge of Allegiance will be led by Commissioner Richard.
Use your right hand over your heart, and repeat after me. I pledge allegiance to the flag
to the flag
of the United States of
America,
to the
and to the
republic
republic
for which it stands, one nation,
one nation,
under God,
under God, indivisible,
Liberty.
with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. Mr. Secretary, will you please call the roll?
Yes, Chairperson Smith,
Present.
Vice Chairperson Al-Shanable is absent. Commissioner Ortiz,
Present.
Commissioner Caraveo,
Present.
and Commissioner Richard.
present.
Thank you. Oral communications. This is a time for oral communications. Because this meeting is not an in-person meeting, members of the public who wish to participate in the meeting were asked to participate by calling or emailing the Planning Department no later than 5:30 p.m. today, noting the item on which the member wants to speak. This information was provided on the agenda posted in compliance with the Brown Act on Friday, May 28, 2021. At this time, if there were any messages left for oral communication, staff will either read messages on behalf of those individuals who wish to provide written comments for oral communication, or invite members of the public who wish to provide oral comments to speak through the Zoom application. Remarks, whether written or oral, are still limited to 3 minutes in duration. Staff, is there any participation from the public for oral communications? This is the time for the public to address the Planning Commission and the airport zoning. Staff, is there anybody?
I don't know if there's anyone for strictly oral communications. I believe they're all on an item.
Okay. All right. And we'll move on then. Planning Commission and Airport Zoning Commission consent calendar, and there are no items. We'll now recess the Airport Zoning Commission and call the Planning Commission consent calendar. Item number 1, consideration of Planning Commission and Airport Zoning Commission minutes for the regular meeting of April 21st, 2021. Do I have a motion to approve?
Approve.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, thank you. So Commissioner Richard made the motion and Commissioner Caraveo seconded. Call for the vote, please.
Yes, Chairperson Smith,
Yes.
Vice Chairperson Al-Shanable is absent. Commissioner Ortiz,
Yes.
Commissioner Caraveo,
Yes.
and Commissioner Richard.
Yes.
Motion passes 4-0.
Thank you. New public hearings. General Plan Amendment 2021 GP01 and Change of Zone 2021 CZ01 Veterans Housing. Staff is recommending that this matter be continued to a future meeting. There is no objections to this matter. If there is no objections, this matter is continued to unanimous consent. Are there objections? Okay, we have unanimous consent. Item number 2, public hearing, Zone Text Amendment 2021 ZA01. Now is the time and place to open the public hearing to consider Zone Text Amendment 2021 ZA01. Art Bashmakian will present a staff report.
Thank you, Chair Smith. Let me share my screen for my PowerPoint. Okay, can everybody see my screen?
Yes.
Oh, great.
Yes.
So I combined, since the staff report combined both items together, so my presentation is combined, but nevertheless, we could still modify it and be able to take appropriate action later. So this is a zone text amendment because they're kind of related, and a density bonus. So I'm going to give some background. This is related to a mixed-use project at Kornblum and Rosecrans. It was a 100-unit mixed-use project that was approved on December 21st, 2016. It involved a density bonus agreement and a track map for a condominium. On August 19, 2021, the Planning Commission approved a modification of this project and adopted a new modified density bonus agreement because the project changed from a condo, a for sale project, to a rental project. Later on, it was determined that this project was also subject to design review. And so on September 2nd, 2021, this project came before the Planning Commission, and the Commission approved the actual development, the design review. Later in October 21st, 2020, the parcel map came before the Planning Commission, and the parcel map was to consolidate 5 of the parcels on the property and create a one parcel for the commercial component and one parcel that would contain the 100-unit residential component. At that time, the Planning Commission found that the project was inconsistent with the zoning code with regards to the project not meeting the front yard setback requirements, and that the building, the actual residential component, building crossed the zoning boundary line. So the building occurred in more than one zone simultaneously. This
Art, I just want to make a correction on the screen. Those 2 dates for 2021, those are 2020, right? August 2020, September 2020, and then October 2020.
Yes, correct. It should be August 19, 2020, September 2nd, 2020, and October 21st, 2021. Oops, sorry. Let me go back. So 2020. So there should be all 2020. Sorry for that error. So yeah, these were before the Planning Commission last year in August for the density bonus modification amendment, the design review September of last year, and the parcel map came before the Planning Commission October, again, 2020. And it was continued a number of times because of those issues related to the front setback and the building straddling 2 different zones. So the parcel map was ultimately continued by the Planning Commission to allow time for the applicant and to address the issue. Staff, planning, and City Attorney's Office worked together and worked with the applicant. And what was decided was one of the solutions was to possibly do a zoning text amendment to eliminate that provision in the code that stipulates a building cannot cross zone boundary. And this map shows the outline of the building, which is this darker blue, and it shows the 2 different zones, the C3 MU mixed use overlay, and also this light brown is the R4 portion. And the yellow line signifies the boundary of the 2 zones. And you can see the building basically straddles the 2 zones. And it should be noted that the same project can be built regardless if the zoning is the same, whether it's C3 MU mixed use, which allows residential, or the R4, which obviously allows residential. So the zone text amendment looks to amend this section of the code, which is an appendix it's under the design guide. And this reads that there are situations where there could be multiple lots with different zones, that each zone shall apply to the project, and whatever zone a project is in or the building is in must conform to that zone. And what I highlighted in yellow, that's the section of the zoning code that staff is recommending to amend. That's a section that reads, in no case shall a single building occur in more than one zone simultaneously by being located across the zone boundary line. By limiting this provision, then the project will be able to conform to the zoning code. We looked at this matter to see if there are any possible unintended consequence of amending this code, which would apply to obviously all of the properties in the R4 zone in a mixed use overlay. And we could not find particular reasons for this. And with my experience also in other planners, most cities don't have a provision that stipulates a building must not occur on two zones simultaneously. For the most part, that doesn't occur because two zones are oftentimes too different, and you can't have one use straddling two different zones. But in this case, the zones are very similar with some minor exceptions. So the project is approved would otherwise comply with the development standards in the C3 MU, the general commercial mixed use, and the R4, maximum density residential. And also if the requested concessions are granted, and concessions related to the front setback. Again, what I want to point out to that the project as designed and as it's been approved by the Planning Commission just happens to comply with all other aspects of the two zones. It just happens to be under the height limit for the R4, and it's consistent with the mixed use commercial. Yeah, just to point out that that's just by default, the project happened to be in conformance with the two codes. So the front setback issue is the front setback for the building, the portion that's within the C3, the required setback is 15 feet. And the portion of the building within the R4 zone required setback is 20 feet. What's proposed, or what's been approved by the Planning Commission during the design review, the front setback, the proposed front setback is 5 feet for the C3 portion and 9 foot 10 inches for the R4. So the concession that's being requested is a waiver of 10 feet for the C3 and 10 feet 2 inches in the R4 portion. I think at this point, I want to maybe conclude my presentation because I want to separate the two items. So what part one is the public hearing on the zone text amendment portion. Then this Planning Commission could deliberate on this matter. And afterwards, I will continue with the PowerPoint presentation once the Planning Commission concludes or takes action on a zone text amendment. Otherwise, I could do the presentation for the entire thing, and if that is if that works better for the commission.
I think we should end it here. Let's talk about this part, and then we'll go on to the next part. I mean, if any other commissioners have any objections.
So I want to point out that we have received a public comment, an email regarding this project from Lorelia Walker. And she writes, at the Hawthorne Planning Commission meeting on December 16, 2020, South Bay New Era LLC sought to combine 5 lots into 2 lots for the development of a 2-phase mixed-use project. It was ultimately determined that the merging of 2 lots was not permitted. Now we are faced with extraordinary proposal to change the Hawthorne Municipal Code to eliminate the provision that prohibits buildings from crossing zone boundaries, thus benefiting South Bay New Era LLC. I urge the Planning Commission to not adopt PC Resolution 2021-07, but to maintain current development standards. Please resist the request to build more outsized highest density projects in our city. Likewise, I urge denial of density bonus application 2021 DB01. Please do not reduce the required front yard setbacks of the proposed project. Please try to keep our city as livable and welcoming as possible. Respectfully submitted, Lorelia Walker. Thank you.
Thank you. Does the planning commission have any questions for staff? This is the time for questions of staff only.
Yeah, I do. First, I want to get a clarification of something. I know on the same slide that we were looking at, where we saw there were dates that were incorrect. Sorry to bring that up again. Or that was the only way. There was no page numbers. That was the easiest way for me to point it out. I just wanted to ask. That's their second statement there. So it's a density bonus agreement was modified and approved on August 19th, 2020. Change from rental sale to change project from sale project to rental. Just for clarity, that's not saying that the planning commission approved this project to be changed from sale to rental, correct?
That's correct. The commission granted the density bonus agreement.
Okay, just wanted to be clear.
The applicant changed the project.
Got you. Okay. Then also speaking to the code changes, when you say that other cities, we've said other cities have not do not have similar provisions. They don't have this in their code. What similar cities have you looked at, and what sections of code show how other cities have dealt with that?
Yes, Commissioner Richard, I have not done actually a survey of other cities. Just to clarify, just based on my experience, having worked in a number of cities and deal with this subject matter, I have not come across a provision that specifies specifically a single building cannot cross a zone boundary.
Got it. Yeah, just mainly just for clarity, just for for myself and for others watching to understand where we were looking or what we were using to make that decision or determination. And also when we discussed the two zones, you mentioned that the two zones were practically the same, except for there were some minor differences within the two zones. Could you mind explaining what the differences between those two zones are?
Yes. Some of the differences include building height. In the mixed-use overlay, the maximum height is 60 feet, 5 stories. In the R4, the maximum height is 50 feet, 4 stories. There are some differences with regards to encroachments within setbacks. For example, in the mixed-use overlay zone, the minimum front yard encroachment is 3 feet. In the R4 zone, it's 10 feet. Again, there's just variations of different encroachments that most zoning codes allow. So there's some differences with regards to sides and rear encroachments, like bay windows and architectural features.
Got it.
The density allowance is the same in both zones. And there's, again, a number of other requirements that are identical. And I could bring up the code sections if I can share the screen, but I just wanted to kind of summarize.
I think that really brings me to my next question. Of the two zones, what would you consider to have the strictest restrictions? When I say strict, I mean, we said one zone has a 60 foot boundary and one has a 50. Which one has the 50? Which one has the furthest setbacks from the street? Overall, things of that nature.
Yes, the R4 zone is more restrictive, and that's the one that has the maximum of 4 stories and 50 feet. And the front setback, which is a formula based on number of stories, it happens to be 20 feet in this case, whereas the mixed use is 15 feet.
Is the property you mentioned was already in, it just naturally hit the height requirements? Does it hit the height requirements for the R4 zone or for the other zone?
The project is under 50 feet for both zones.
Gotcha. Okay.
And 4 stories.
And then my last question would be if it's or I guess this would be two, it's the position of staff that we should go ahead and what do we say, just approve this amendment. Am I correct?
The staff's recommendation is to recommend to the city council the amendment
amend.
of the zoning text.
If we were to move forward with that, under what would the new zone be? Would it be an R4 zone or would it be? I
So
can't
what's,
remember what the
no,
original-
what's before you, what staff is recommending in this case is not to change the zoning designation, simply to eliminate that one sentence in the code that prohibits a building from straddling two different zones. So in
Sorry.
this case, the building could, if the commission and ultimately the city council were to approve this amendment, then a building could straddle two different zones. But the building, a building, whether this project or other projects, would still have to conform to its respective zones.
So essentially what I'm asking is if a building were allowed to straddle two zones, would that mean on one half of the building it would be allowed to be 60 feet, on the other half it would be allowed to be 50? Or would they all have, because it straddles two zones, would it get the 60-foot allotment across the two zones?
It would not. So if a building was straddling, then the portion of the building within the R4 zone has to conform to the R4 standards. The portion within the MU would have to conform to the mixed use standards. And just to add one more comment, because I just visualize a building that's kind of awkward shaped.
Yeah.
Remember, the city has the design review process, and you still have lots of controls to address a design of a building. So regardless of the standards, the maximum standards in the.
You saw what I was seeing was a building, a lopsided building. That's
Yes,
what
I
was.
absolutely, I understand, yes.
Okay. This is the most of my questions. The other commissioners have questions.
Any of the other commissioners have any questions?
Yeah, I have a question about the requested concessions. So you said that's related to setbacks, correct? But I thought in that chart that you had, Art, that you identified, there was like 3 columns on that chart. Can you
Yes, I could.
bring it back up?
Let me bring that up.
So those concessions were not part of the density bonus, right?
Can you see the screen with the chart?
Not yet.
No.
Not yet. Okay, so hold on.
There you are.
Can you
There
see
we go.
that? The front
Yes.
setback? Okay. Let me just-
Okay, so it's the front setback required, then you have the front setback provided. I don't understand. So what's the difference between the front setback provided and the concession? They provided that, that's what's currently in the plan that came before us, and now they're asking for this a concession, or?
Yeah, so if I could, maybe back up. When this item was before you back in September or August, and the density bonus was considered and approved, as you recall, much later on in October, when the parcel map came before the commission, that's when Commissioner Caravello made a point about the consistency of the project with zoning standards. And that's allowed staff to go back and review and concur that the project did not meet the front yard setback requirements. And as a manner to allow for the setbacks to be approved, what was apparently omitted back in even 2016 was the concession. When you do a density bonus, the applicant could request a concession, a waiver basically from development standards. So what we are doing now is really modifying that density bonus and adding the discussion on the setbacks to allow for the project as proposed, as was approved, for that to basically be granted. For that omission that was done to be corrected, and to add a section in the density bonus agreement with regards to the concessions.
Okay, but
So
when the density bonus was granted, it, there's a concession, right? That's part of the density, that goes along with the density bonus. So when it was granted, wouldn't that concessions had to have been identified? I mean, we granted a
Yeah,
density bonus.
they were not identified that originally. And so what we're doing is coming back to you now and basically correcting that and identifying the concessions so that it's tied to the density bonus that was originally granted, but it had the concessions were not included. Now we're trying to include that concessions. And so the required setback is 15 feet. And what the applicant is proposing is 5 feet for the C3. And so and then the other situation is the R4, where the required setback is 20. And what the applicant's proposing is 9 feet 10 inches. So a concession would be to allow for this project to have the proposed setbacks of 5 feet and 9 feet 10 inches.
Okay, and now, do we have to allow the concessions as part of the density bonus?
Yes, so this next slide, I'm sorry.
I was going to step in just to give a little bit of two things I was going to say, Commissioner. One is we can talk about this now, but we're also going to talk about this again because we split up the presentation into two. So we can talk about this again, but just to answer your question, when they make a request for a density bonus, the density bonus itself is just additional units. They are entitled to request concessions or waivers of development standards. So at the time that this initially came to us, they forewent that. They did not ask for any concessions or waivers. Because this was discovered, they're just coming back to make that request formally. And so it requires an amendment to the density bonus housing agreement. But they do go together. The density bonus and the concessions and incentives are what the law allows the applicants to receive. They're entitled to both. Just in our case, initially, they didn't ask for anything. But now we've come back and are recommending that we do grant this request that they've made. I don't know if that, hopefully that answers your question.
Yes, that answers my question. It is kind of perplexing that they didn't ask for the concessions. That's why I just wanted to make sure, because typically they do. And yeah.
Yeah,
I have seen that happen. I've seen it happen where they just don't feel that they need anything, so they don't ask for a concession. But then in our case, it was discovered that they do require that to make their project move forward. So that's why they brought it back. That's why they applied again. And the density bonus hasn't changed. The actual additional units, the number hasn't changed. It's just the addition of the concession.
yeah, and I have to add, yeah, it is confusing because normally it would be done in one setting. A project would be all together, but for whatever reason, it wasn't done that way in 2016 and so on.
Okay, another question of staff. I'm sorry, I'll hold in case someone else has to ask a question.
Okay, is there anyone else with a question of staff?
I had a question for the development standards that you have in the slide that goes over the zone text that's being amended. Can you go back to that slide? Okay, and then so this is the actual text from the code.
That's correct.
Okay.
It's in the appendix, actually, which is part of the code, but it's in the appendix, just in case you wanted to locate that.
Okay, any more questions?
Yes. So Art, if you wouldn't mind, or Jason, I don't know, were you still reading? Were you reading this, or did you need this part? Or
Yeah, I was still reading it.
okay, yeah, I thought so. Well, I think I can ask my question while he's reading. Based on what she explained here about the concessions being a part of the density bonus, like they're so just for plain English sake, uh, if when an applicant applies for a density bonus, they are entitled to these concessions. They're entitled now. Is there a limit, or should I say, is there an upward bound of how much of a concession that can be applied? And if so, what is that?
3.
Yes, oh, thank you. There's a limit.
There's a limit of
There is a limit, 3.
a limit of 3 concessions or a limit of 3 feet?
No, a limit of 3 concessions. So depending on what level of what the percentage of the density bonus is going to be, they either get 1, 2, or 3 concessions.
Okay, and when you say 1, 2, or 3 concessions, that means whatever concessions that they need in order to make the project work.
Feasible.
No,
Yes,
however
correct.
they deem feasible.
Yes.
So that number would be populated based on what the applicant sees is necessary.
It could be a parking concession, could be 1. It could be a setback. It could be a height concession. It could be whatever it is necessary to make the project feasible.
Got it.
And then, so going back to the zone text amendment, does this apply to just the overlay zone, the mixed use overlay zone, or is it all zones?
This would apply to the R4 and a mixed use overlay.
In the text it says R3, so would it be like R3, R4? It looks like it just gives an example. It says, for instance, if a project is a parcel is in the mixed use overlay zone, as well as parcel located in the R3 zone.
Yeah, let me check that section of the code, because I believe that area, the mixed use, does include areas that have R3 zoning. Let me just confirm. That may be the reason why. Yeah, so it could be R3 also. Nice. Stand corrected.
And then so this text just in the mixed use overlay, or is it R3, R4, and R4 that it applies to?
It's under, I'm gonna stop the screen sharing here. Okay, let me just bring up the section of the code. So it's an appendix, it's design guide for highest density residential and mixed use development. And going through that document to see if there's a map that specifies areas. Yeah, there are specific areas in the document that addresses this. And R4, see, that's the thing, this code says R4 maximum. I'll have to take a look, because it's not clear from this document if R3 is applicable, because it's just talking about the C3, C1, and R4 zones.
It's confusing because they're saying highest density.
Yeah.
R3 is considered high density and R4 is considered maximum density, but they're using neither of those two words.
Yeah.
They're using the word highest, but they're referring to R4.
And thanks for bringing up the question, because as I'm looking at this, I think the more appropriate, maybe we might staff may recommend fine tuning this amendment so that it would be only applicable in a situation where you have an R4 in a mixed use and not anywhere else. So that narrows it down to only a certain area within the city. And I think it's more consistent with the intent of this document.
Art, if you look at section 1.3 applicability
Yes.
of that appendix, I think that's where you'll get your.
I'm going to share that screen, so I think it might be. Okay. Can you see the map?
That's hard. That's real hard to see.
Is it hard? I can't, yeah, it's hard for me to tell how much it's visible from,
If you blow it up to 200,
yeah, hit the
trying to make.
keep going right there. Left one more to the left, one button to the left, wrong way. There you go. Keep going. Oh wait, yeah, or try to go back to the, there you go, that'll do it too.
No, that's. I'm trying to see how else I can make this larger. Oh. Is that better, or is that?
I don't want to give you false hope and say yes, but I think it's as best as it's gonna get.
Yeah, I think it's, I could see it.
One will be my eyes.
So pretty much change this zone text amendment will apply to these areas, is what you're saying.
Yeah, so the objective and the intent, and I think we would fine tune this amendment so that it's really applicable only in a situation where you have this interface between the C3 MU overlay and the R4 zoning, which is this darker kind of orange area.
Art, if you go to above it where the written dialogue is, 1.3, I think that's where it specifically says to projects, the sites that apply are either proposed multifamily projects located in the R4 zone or proposed mixed-use developments located in the mixed-use overlay zones.
Yeah, I just want to make sure that there's not an unintended ambiguity in the amendment where there are areas where the mixed use does abut an R3. And we just want to make sure that in that situation, the intent is not for the building to straddle in a situation where you have an R3 and a mixed use, because now you're getting to very different zones. The R4 and an overlay are somewhat similar in terms of residential components, but the R3 is quite different.
But in either case, if we were to have a single building that is straddling both zones, the building would have to comply with the most strictest of the zones, right? If it's one single building.
If it's one single building, the building would have to conform to whichever zone it's located in.
Well,
The portion, so the portion of the building within the R4 conforms to the R4 standards. The portion within the C3 would have to conform to the C3 standards.
okay, that's fine. It's a bit complicated, but
Yeah,
I think, I don't know if that's the only text that explains that, but if it is, it should be further clarified that that's the intent, so that we're not getting applications where, you know, it gets denied or it significantly gets changed through the process.
Okay, is there any other questions for staff from commissioners?
Well, so if you can, sorry, if you can answer, is there other locations in the zoning standards that identifies that requirement, that if it's within a certain zone, it has to meet that, or?
I'm reading this language. When multiple lots having different zoning designations are combined into a single project, the permitted uses, development standards, and other requirements for each zone shall still apply to the individual lots. And for instance, a project consisting of parcels located in the mixed-use overlay zone as well as parcels located in the R3 zone may be entitled without necessitating a discretion review if the project is designed according to the allowances and requirements of each zone.
Okay,
I think it's there, but I
Yeah.
see that, I think we can maybe modify that language and improve upon it so that ambiguity is eliminated with regards to the issue that you raised, Mr. Ortiz.
okay, I have no,
Okay. Last question of staff. At this point, what are we to, what do we have to do in this case? I know we just mentioned there was a potential of cleaning up the resolution. So what we need to vote to approve, can we vote to continue? What is our scope here?
One option could be to continue. We could come back with a language that fine tunes and addresses some of those items that have been raised, so it's clarifies. Or if the commission gives us basic direction, we could modify that language as directed by the commission so that we could forward that to the city council with those changes to reflect the commission's concerns. That'll expedite the process if we do it in that manner.
yeah, I have no issue with the latter. I mean, the intention is pretty clear. It just needs, you know, no pun intended, it needs to be clear. So that's about it.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah, that's my last question. I don't know, what do we have next?
Well, my comment would be, I think we should continue it and let the planning department clarify it a lot more like they're talking about they want to do. So that, you know, everything is a little bit, it's not quite clear at this point.
Agreed. My only caveat would be I would like to see it clarified, and I'd also like the planning commission to have an opportunity to look at it, the new language, to see what comes back. But personally, I would also like to see a little bit of research done about how other cities handle this, because it seems like we have a special issue here, or not issue, but situation in Hawthorne where we have zones that are rather similar or that may be different close to each other, whereas when we said in other cities the reason they don't have this kind of language is because their zones tend to be drastically different when they're next to each other, so there's no reason for them to overlay or to cross each other. So I'd like to know if there's other cities who have encountered this and how they've dealt with it. Has it presented any unintended consequences in those spaces as well?
Real thorough, dude. I'll give you that. Oh, good.
So what did,
I don't know. I don't know what we do here if we have to
Well,
talk to
this-
the
you-
talk to the
you have-
applicant. What do
Remember,
we-
this is a public hearing, so
Public hearing.
you're in the phase of asking staff questions for clarification. So maybe now you could get to open the public hearing for public
Oh.
comments.
Okay, so let's move on then. Is the applicant present and do they wish to speak?
Yes, and yes.
Okay, go right ahead, sir.
Thank you. My name is Steve Goldberg. I'm an attorney for the applicant who is also present. I appreciate the staff report and the comments that everyone has made. And I want to address a couple of the issues. Part of the reason that, for example, people were saying, well, why wasn't this concession request part of the original density bonus application? And the answer is because at the time, nobody thought it was necessary. We didn't have a setback problem. There is a question, in fact, as it stands right here, the applicant isn't even sure that given the time when this project was first introduced back in 2016, I believe, it was before the new setbacks came in, and we have a letter from you saying that the new setbacks don't apply to this project. The applicant has taken the position that we really don't need the concession, but we've applied for the concession because we were informed that we can ask. It's certainly, I cannot imagine that the commission would find that the criteria to deny the concessions would be met here, because they won't. There aren't any issues that are going to create, and there is apparently, according to the current zoning, no way to do this project without the concession on the setbacks. And there's no indication, I don't believe there's any indication of any adverse impact that's going to result. We've designed this building, and the plans have been before you, I believe, on more than one occasion. You can see what's intended, and it's not some crazy hybrid project where this one is 5 feet higher than that one because it can be. The whole purpose of the mixed use plan is to do what this project does. This is the design guide for highest density residential and mixed use development. And that's what this is. This is 100 units in the city of Hawthorne, high-end units. Those of you who are familiar with Bill Hassan and his work, you know that he builds top quality product. And this is the kind of thing that brings the kind of residents that you want to attract. This is a beautiful commercial development on the Rosecrans portion. The setback issues are on the Kornblum side. And I think it's important to remember that this project was approved back in 2016 conceptually. And then there was because of things that were happening in the market and other issues, there was a desire to make it rental rather than necessarily selling it out. So we went back to square one, and this was all approved back in October. And nobody said anything about the building being in 2 zones, but it has been for 5 years. This building that has been before the Planning Commission on at least 3 occasions has always straddled the 2 zones, and nobody said a word. And I think that the notion that this should be continued again is it's enough already. It's too long. In reliance on the initial approvals, the applicant spent hundreds of thousands of dollars designing this project. And you can look at the project, you can see the quality in the design, you can see the aesthetics in the design. This is a good project. And it's for whatever reason, it looks to us like mistakes were made. I think that staff would acknowledge that there have been mistakes in this project. And at what point does the commission look at it and say, yes, we will approve these. However, we direct staff to clarify in the resolution these issues we're talking about. It's not that complicated. And I think that the applicant at this point deserves to have this matter heard and approved, and we'll make the paperwork right. Bill Hassan isn't going anywhere. He is in your community, and I think he deserves to be accorded the respect and, you know, what this project is bringing to the city. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Is Mr. Hassan, did you want to say anything?
I can't add, hello, everybody. I can't add anything else, but thank you for asking.
Okay, thank you. Is there anyone else who wishes to address the commission on this issue? Staff, is there anyone waiting to speak on this issue?
We did have some speakers. Debbie, are you able to bring up, I don't have the names, but I believe there was one individual that wanted to speak. I could be mistaken, but I think there was one.
The only two people were Bill Hassan and Mr. Names that were given, Goldberg, I believe.
Okay, so the other two names that I see on there are the applicants for the other project then.
Right.
Because there were two. Okay, so it doesn't appear that there's anyone that wishes to speak.
Thank you, then we'll move on. Mr. Sujuichi, is there any documents to place into the administrative records such as late communications?
There is one that we'll submit, but it was read by Art Bashmakian already. That was
Okay.
an email he read.
Do any of my fellow commissioners have any final comments on this item or questions from staff?
I had a question for staff or maybe the applicant. I was trying to see what was the reason for not doing a zone change instead of a amendment to the code.
I'm happy to address that, Mr. Chairperson, if you'd like.
Okay, go ahead.
We took our guidance from staff. Staff brought this matter to our attention, acknowledging that there was some confusion along the way. Staff gave us some guidance as to what would be the proper procedures to follow. And I think that staff would confirm that we followed the procedures that were recommended.
Okay, thank you.
Yes,
All right.
that's correct. Did that answer your question?
So then I guess the question is for staff, well, why did we direct them to do the zone text amendment instead of doing a zone change?
Sure, I could add to that. A couple of reasons. One, we recognize the situation that the applicant was in, and honestly, we're trying to help this project correct the past situation and move this thing forward as quickly. And the zone text amendment is a simple process, and it's not going to affect anything else. The other option would have been to do a zone change which could have other unforeseen issues, but zone change would also require general plan amendment. So the process would probably add 6 to 9 months. Whereas the zone text amendment only takes a couple of months to process. I don't know, Melissa, if there was anything else that you want to add, but.
Yeah, I was just going to add, yes, it's to expedite the process, but also because we didn't think that a zone change was necessary. If the project meets the requirements of each zone and there's no issues with that, because the issue really isn't the zoning, the issue is just the language in the appendix, which could more quickly be just deleted because it didn't even seem to be necessary. We already addressed in there in the appendix that you had to comply with the development standards of each zone. So this was almost kind of an unnecessary requirement and a little bit odd. So that made more sense. The zoning wasn't the issue. So we just, to change the zone of the property seemed unnecessary, and also a bit of a delay. It really didn't seem to be it wasn't necessary.
Okay,
Does that answer your question?
Yeah, and I mean, I understand that, we're looking at this project in particular, but when we deal with a zone text amendment, it does apply to, multiple properties, not just, this particular, situation. So, when we're deliberating, this, as a commission, we have to think that, this doesn't just affect this one project. It affects, all those other areas that are pretty much governed by that development standard. And by doing just a zone change for this project, it would keep that change special to this project. Or if they were to do a specific plan, is that still an option to do, or is that process longer than the zone change?
It is, and staff did look at that though. We did consider what would be the more appropriate avenue, and I think Art mentioned that the changing the language of the appendix made more sense because it didn't have unintended consequences. It really didn't seem like the language was even that was necessary for us to have. The zoning is what mattered, and the development standards is what mattered. And as long as it was clear, which it is clear in the appendix, that you had to comply with both, that wasn't an issue. And it's not an issue for this project either, as Art kind of explained. So I think that this is staff's recommendation is to change that language. It would apply to other properties, but we looked at the map and there are few properties that this would really affect. And it just makes more sense to remove the language and to take this issue, take this matter of the building straddling two zones out of the equation. That type of an issue should be able to take care of itself, because again, if you have the straddling of two zones, then you still have to comply with both. So, I mean, if the applicant wanted to change a zone, they can, if it precludes their project, but in this case, it doesn't.
And if I could add to respond to the question, Garavia's question, there's basically two possibilities, correct? Is to change the R4 portion of the zone to C3 MU, then you have one zone. Or the other way is to change the portion of the C3 to R4. So there's a problem with the latter, because if we change the C3 MU to R4, you are reducing the allowable height. And that's actually contrary to state law. Cities are precluded from changing their zoning, which could affect potential densities and allowable residential development. So that's out the door. So the only option left is to change the R4 to C3. Now you're going to allow for more intensive uses and height that further encroaches into a residential area. And I think that's not really appropriate. So those are other strong reasons why the zone change is not the best option.
And then what about a specific plan?
To do a specific plan for this area to create its own, that we'll talk about, that would take a substantial amount of time to do a specific plan. They're very involved.
It's a lot of community input. I think
There's,
the
the specific plan is very involving. It's, I would think it would take at least 6 months to a year to process a specific plan.
Not only that, but a specific plan, the applicant can propose any type of density it likes. Obviously, the commission would have to review it and approve it, but nevertheless, yeah, it would. I don't see what merits.
Yeah, at the end of the day, maybe that specific plan that's proposed is not acceptable. So it could take a long time and get to a point where the plan is rejected. So we thought this would be a simpler process without really any unintended consequences.
And it wasn't the applicant's desire to do a specific plan. That wasn't their application.
Okay, I think our staff has given us a pretty clear explanation, and I'm going to withdraw my thought about maybe we should continue it.
That's I have,
And nothing.
I-
And yes,
I had one question of the of the applicant. So the question I just wanted to ask was regarding the concessions. So as we've discussed before, or you've mentioned previously that this project has been approved since 2016, has seen us before, it's been approved before. That's based on the statement you've made before, but we also, as you said, the concessions may have been overlooked or had not been asked for previously. So I was wondering, since nothing has materially changed about the project, what was it that made the applicant feel it was necessary to now ask for the concessions while understanding you are entitled to them? I just wondered, what was it that brought that on?
Staff told us that we should do it this way. And again, when they're trying to tell me what I need to do, and as arrogant as I usually am, if they tell me this is the way to do it, I did it. So right or wrong, that's what I did.
That's fair.
And I appreciate
So,
the question, sir.
so I guess the question then, same as the previous question, becomes, as of staff, what was the material impact of now asking for the concessions rather than since we have, as the applicant stated, approved it? What was the point?
You want me to?
I can, either way, go ahead.
Well,
go ahead.
I'll take the first stab. Again, when we recognize the issue with the setbacks, it could not be ignored, obviously. So there were different options. And similar to the zone change situation, well, one option could be applying for a variance, but you have to have the variance procedure is very specific criteria, there's findings, and there has to be justification. But the obvious thing was, when you do density bonus, concessions are almost automatically tied with it. And so it was obvious to staff this project would have been appropriate if the applicant had submitted a request for a concession. And that seemed the most logical and appropriate and code conforming method to address the issue of the setbacks.
okay, thank you. So now I'm going to formally close the public hearing on this item. Call on my fellow commissioners for a vote on this item. So do I have a motion from one of the commissioners?
Did we still have updates for that code section that we had talked about?
I think where we landed on was we would need to have staff update it and send that updated version along rather than bringing it back. I think I did not explain that in the proper terms, but I think I got the general words that's supposed to make sense there. You know, maybe someone else should explain it, because I'm not. Melissa, this is your ballpark.
Yeah. No, so the two options were to either continue the matter and then bring it back with the language that would clarify that, and it wouldn't even be clarifying, it would actually be duplicating the language that's already in there, in other words, because it does already require that if you are in two different zones, you have to comply with the development standards of each zone. So that is in there. We as staff could enhance that by making it even clearer. We can do that. So the option was to continue for us to do that. But the other option was go ahead and accept staff is recommending that you approve this, and then allow us to make that additional clarification, adding some clarification language to the resolution, and then move it up to the city council. The city council will see it that way. We could also, just as a courtesy, bring it back to you as well, just so that you could see what we ended up doing, or you can just see what's being taken to the city council. But from my perspective, it makes more sense to just go ahead and approve with us making the changes. It would literally be us duplicating, adding a sentence, because it really is already in there. As I read it, it's in there. It really is in there. So it's not very substantive, and it would not make sense to delay this to simply add some duplicative language to the appendix. So maybe I didn't explain it better. I think you explained it perfectly fine, Commissioner Richard. But what the motion would be is to approve the resolution presented by staff with the direction that staff consider some additional clarifying language to ensure that it's clear that a development has to meet the development standards of each zone. That's it, just additional direction for staff to include some clarifying language.
Okay,
That would be the amendment to the motion.
I'll make a motion that we approve.
Okay.
Is there a second?
I had a question because I was reading the that section of the code that we're amending, and I mean it sounds like it's asking that they, you know, merge the lot or create some type of, you know, zone change or specific plan in that section.
I think there is some merged language in, I'm sorry, did you have an additional question?
No, I was just going to clarify that. It does say it encourages. I believe that's the word, encourages. Now,
Yeah.
given the fact that whether it's merged, we went over those options. If it's merged into a single zone, you know, it really doesn't change what the outcome of the potential project can be. Either merging into a single zone, potentially, you know, we would increase the density if they decide to go with the mixed use. And given that the language is pretty clear in terms of what the limitations are for each individual zone when it is when the building crosses or the project crosses multi-zones, I really don't see a different outcome in this or any beneficial outcome in belaboring this. So that's just my opinion.
I just feel like, you know, by removing this section, it would, you know, we're kind of be contradicting ourselves because, you know, we're saying that, you know, they can combine properties over multiple zones, but yet we're encouraging them to, you know, do zone changes and specific plans. I mean, it would look, you know, neater if they were to, you know, update the zone to what they, you know, actually want. And, you know, moving forward with future projects, you know, that means that they can come in and not necessarily have to do a zone change or a specific plan. They can just, you know, come in as it is and propose a project over multiple zoned lots and, you know, get it approved that way without, you know, having to do a zone change or specific plan. And then we have a map that looks, you know, all different, you know, kind of colors. And I mean, I would, especially, you know, since it's in the code and it's suggesting that they, you know, do the zone change or specific plan, and then, you know, we're going against, you know, what the code section is saying. For this, you know, one project, would affect future projects.
Okay,
I was just gonna add, Art, could you explain, so the language that's being modified is just the removal of that sentence. So it doesn't change anything else. Everything else would stay in place. Is that correct, Art?
Yeah, and now I'm going to share the screen with that language again, if that's the commission's desire. Or I could just read. You're correct, Melissa. And that section says it is encouraged that projects consisting of multiple lots be consolidated by a lot merge. That simply is talking about lots, has nothing to do with zoning, because
Right.
earlier in that paragraph, it talks about There are situations where there could be multiple lots having different zones and so on. They're combined into a single project. It's all good. That's permitted, so long as development standards requirements for each zone are applied. So it's recognizing that situation. But later on says that, it's encouraging lots to be consolidated. Again, that's simply for lots. The last sentence is critical because it says a discretionary review process would be triggered for projects seeking a change of zone to form a single zoning designation or for projects submitted as a specific plan. What that's saying is a lot of these projects are permitted by right, basically. It doesn't require discretionary review. This is the setup of this ordinance. And this is just a reminder saying, oh, by the way, if you're going to change zoning, becomes a discretionary process. It's a reminder. It's just a heads up. And it doesn't really say, oh, lots of different zones must be combined into one. I don't read it that way.
Okay, so again, I'll mention we have a motion on the floor. Is there a second?
I'll second that motion.
Okay, call for the vote, please. I have a question really quick of staff. You put the two, part one and part two. This is the final.
This would be part one, and then we'll do a separate hearing for
Yes,
this.
this is the zone text amendment, and then we'll do the density bonus as part two, because that's a non-public hearing item.
Okay, fine. Okay, so call for the vote then, please, on this.
Chairperson Smith,
Yes.
Vice Chairperson Al Shanabli is absent. Commissioner Ortiz,
Yes.
Commissioner Carabeo,
No.
and Commissioner Richard.
Yes.
Motion passes 3-1.
Okay. So the next non-public hearing is a density bonus application 2021 DB01. Mr. Basmakian will present a staff report.
Yes, I'll just make this report brief because we pretty much touched upon this issue already in discussing previously. The density bonus is being amended to reflect the request for the concessions for the front setbacks. And everything else in a density bonus agreement is unchanged, remains the same. Again, it's only adding the provision with regards to the concession of the front setback. That's basically it. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer.
Okay, are there any, does the Planning Commission have any questions for staff? This is for staff only.
So just for clarification, so we understand, to further restate the statement, we are voting to approve an amendment that's specifically around the setback, specifically around the concession of the setback. That's what we're voting on. We're not voting to approve any new density bonus or anything like that. We're voting to apply an amendment to the previous density bonus, which, as we all understand, density bonuses come from the state. They're not something that we really have much leeway in the first place. They are something that's state approved. Am I correct in my understanding?
Yes, the state law basically requires a city to grant a concession unless if the city can make a finding that there will be detrimental impacts if that concession is granted. And we don't have any evidence that that would be the case.
Just for the sake of questioning, sorry, what exactly is defined as a detrimental finding when it comes to a density setback? Because I don't think that I've actually heard anyone make a case of where there was a detrimental finding. So I really want questioning is that language simply to say you can't do it anyway, because that's basically what it's saying. So let's just, for the sake of the people at home who are asking the question, what does that mean? Let's just make it as clear as possible.
Okay. I love how you put that question to us. So, okay.
The truth.
I'm gonna go back to the beginning of your question. state density bonus law is it is a requirement of the state, and the state has been amending density bonus law for several years now to provide more and more bonus and leeway to applicants that come in. So yeah, you are not approving a density bonus. You are approving an amendment to add a concession to this density bonus housing agreement. There is a provision of the law that talks about adverse impacts related to health, safety, and welfare. There is a provision in there that talks about that. It's very difficult finding to make, and it has to do with health and safety. There has to be an issue. So you have to make a link between whatever the concession is. If it's a setback, somehow having the setback be a certain number instead of what's required would somehow impact health and safety. That is a very difficult bar. Everyone knows it's a difficult bar. I'm not aware of a lot of cities that have invoked it. It has to be pretty clear because, again, the point of density bonus law is to increase and to make feasible these projects. So if you're going to make that leap, you really have to have a lot of findings, a lot of research, a lot of analysis. Staff doesn't have that for you because it's not applicable in this case. It's simply a setback. You've already seen what the setback concession is being asked of. So to answer your question, yes, there is something in the law that talks about that, but it's very, very difficult finding to make, and that's not staff's recommendation. That finding hasn't been made here.
Thank you.
Okay, is the applicant present? Do they wish to speak?
We are present. I'm not sure that we have the right to speak because I don't think it's a public hearing.
It's not a public hearing, Mr. Goldberg, but if you'd like to speak, I think if the commission allows it, that's perfectly fine.
I think that Art has done a good job explaining it. You guys understand it. You've asked the right questions, and I'm comfortable that you have all the information. Of course, we'll answer any questions you have, but I feel like you guys have been paying attention and you could make my arguments for me if I needed you to.
Okay, thank you then. All right, do any of my fellow commissioners have any final comments on the item or questions from staff? Okay, if I hear no one, then do I have a motion? Someone like to make a motion?
I'll make the motion to approve.
Is there a second? I'll second it. Will the secretary please call for the vote?
Yes, Chairperson Smith,
Yes.
Vice Chairperson Ashnaba is absent. Commissioner Ortiz,
Yes.
Commissioner Caraveo,
Yes.
and Commissioner Richards.
Yes.
Motion passes 4-0.
Okay, thank you. We'll now recess the planning commission, excuse me, and call back to order the Airport Zoning Commission. Airport Zoning Commission consent calendar, there are no items. Airport Zoning Commission new continued public hearings. No items. We'll now call back to order the Planning Commission, currently with the Airport Zoning Commission. Non-public hearing items, there are none. Administrative items. Number one is a color approval, multifamily at 11617 Acacia Avenue apartment building. Senior Planner Maria Maharick will present a staff report.
Good evening, Commissioners. Can you see my full screen for my PowerPoint presentation?
Yes.
Yes.
Wonderful, thank you. I will be presenting the color consent application for 14351 Hindley Avenue, which is an apartment building. The property is located within the R3 zone, as you can see from the zoning and the vicinity map. And these are existing photos of the facade of the exterior of this building. As you can see in the front, there's one of the units is 1 story, and then it's attached to the rear units, which are 2 stories. There is a total of 4 units on this lot, and per our Hawthorne Municipal Code, it does require approval by the Planning Commission for the colors that are being proposed. You get a hint of the color already in the fencing that you can see in the upper left corner of the photo. And as you can see, they are changing it to give it a more modern look. Now, I do want to say that the applicant did begin painting the building and the stucco fencing, and they were unaware that they required approval, but they immediately stopped and submitted all of their items so that we can present this to you. One of the things I want to point out is that fireplace that you can see on the right hand side, along with the photo above, which is one of the planters that has the same type of material. That's another change they'll do along with the colors. And before you is the proposal. On the upper left-hand corner, you see the portion that the applicant had begun to paint. It's difficult to show you the colors, obviously, because we're not in person, but it is a dark blue. It looks a little purple here, but it's not really purple. The base color is Cape Storm, which is it's a gray color with a little bit of a bluish tint. And the accent is called Academic Navy. And the trim will be black and white, as you can see from the fencing, the doors, the windows. Those are going to be either black or white. And there's a little bit of a rendering there with the stacked stone. This is the fireplace that I mentioned. They are going to change from the other stone to this new stone, and it'll go well with the new colors and the more modern look that they are trying to achieve in this particular building. So with that, staff does recommend that the Planning Commission approve the proposed color palette along with the stone that the applicant is requesting.
Okay, does the Planning Commission have any questions for staff? This is the time for questions of staff only. Gentlemen, any questions?
I think my question might be better saved for the end of this.
Okay.
Yeah. Not to belabor the applicant.
Okay. Is the applicant present? Do they wish to speak?
Yes, we're present.
Okay, would you like to speak?
We just, did the building. My husband and I just recently took over the building from his father, who's been ill. And so we've been trying to update, and we did the interior on 3 out of the 4 units already, and just wanted to do the outside of the building. So hopefully, modernize it and make it look a little bit better.
Okay, thank you. Do any of my fellow commissioners have any final comments on this item or questions from staff? Commissioner Ryan, Richard, would you?
Okay. This doesn't specifically relate to this particular applicant, but I've noticed over the past couple applications we've had a similar pattern where applicants miss or are unable to, they don't know that they're supposed to approach the Planning Commission, or it seems like they may or may not be notified that they have to do these things ahead of time. So I was just wondering that's why I was saying maybe this be after our vote to ask about like how does that process work, or why does it change, things like that.
Would you
Well,
like,
I was just gonna comment that what R was, when I originally read the city's planning instructions, I didn't realize that it was different for a single family home versus a 4-unit building. So that was part of it as well. And then I was informed that being a 4-unit building, everything fell under commercial standards. So that's where my communication happened. But we're also, again, new to this. We kind of fell into this project. His dad already had some issues, complying with the city in getting the property cleaned up and doing some other projects on it. So we just kind of stepped in to do this at the last minute and weren't really sure of everything. So we were new to this, and so we've made a couple of mistakes along the way, but hopefully have rectified it and got everything on track now. One more thing I just did want to mention real quick is that the address is wrong on this. We're actually on Acacia. We're 11617 Acacia Avenue, not Hendry.
Oh, I apologize for that. It is
That's okay.
11617 Acacia. That is my next presentation.
It is correct on the agenda, Chairperson, just so you
Yes,
know.
it's correct on the agenda and it's correct on the staff report.
Okay.
okay, thank you. So do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Is there a second?
A second.
Call for the vote, please.
Chairperson Smith,
Yes.
Vice Chairperson Al-Shanable is absent, Commissioner Ortiz,
Yes.
Commissioner Caraveo,
Yes.
and Commissioner Richard.
Yes.
Motion passes 4-0.
Thank you. Next item is color approval, multifamily, 14351 Hendry Avenue, Bed Bath and Beyond. Maria Maharick will present a staff report.
Good evening, commissioners. This one is 14351 Hendry Avenue, the Bed Bath and Beyond. And you are very familiar with this particular location. It's off of Rosecrans and Hendry. It's one of our larger commercial establishments, and it's the same location where you find Costco and you find the New World Market and a few restaurants that are located in this particular area as well. And it is in the CR, Regional Commercial Zone, as you can see from the zoning and vicinity map. This is an existing view of the Bed Bath & Beyond. There's a couple of things that are going to occur. They are going to just put in the accent color, which you will see in the next slide. And they also are going to update that motif that you see circled in red before you on the screen. And that'll, it's a little bit older in the sense of what it looks like with the motif. So the new facade, which is just that small area, will update it a bit more. And the accent color will also be around the other sign, which is on the side of the building, as you can see from the lower right-hand photograph. Oh, I'm sorry, Monica, I think you aren't muted. Okay, thank you. Okay, here is on the next slide, as I mentioned, the area circled in red is where they're going to remove the older motif and just put some nice slats across the front to modernize it. And it looks actually a bit better with the existing building as well. And the only color they are changing is just the accent color, as you can see before you. And it'll frame not only the signs on both sides, but it will just frame that one front portion. The other colors will remain the same, the light beige and the light gray. And those are the trims that are on the existing building. And you see that throughout the center, some of these colors. And the buildings each have their own special touch, and it's just an accent. And this is what Bed Bath and Beyond is trying to do, the same sort of thing, and just updating it just enough to give it a better view. And with that, staff recommends that the Planning Commission approve the proposed color palette and the minor change from the motive to the updated panels as proposed. And that concludes my staff report.
Thank you. Does the Planning Commission have any questions for staff? This is time for questions of staff only. None? Okay. Is the present, do they wish to?
Yes, hello. My name is Glenn Rechtenbaugh, and I'm with Bed Bath & Beyond. I'm an architectural project manager working on this store. Just to clarify one item that Marie had mentioned, that the trim colors which remain the same. If you look at the rendering that we're showing, actually the two flanking pilasters are a slightly different gray than what is there now, as well as the lower portion and the trim. The window trim right now is a pale green color. We're trying to unify that with the grays that are throughout the center. So that is changing those two flanking elements, as you see, and the lower portion going from a darker gray to a lighter gray, and the trim by the storefront system as well. And one other thing that was not mentioned in here is that the reason for the change for the blue is that we're making a rebranding of our name and our logo across the country, and the blue is a key element to that. What we will also need is the approval for the pylon panel, which currently has white letters with a black background, and we would make that white letters with the same blue background that we're putting on the building.
Okay. Thank you. Do any of my fellow commissioners have any final comments on this item or questions from staff? Hearing none. Do I have a motion to approve?
I'll make the motion.
Second.
Okay. Call for the roll, please.
Chairperson Smith?
Say yes, but I also make a comment. You know, the Bed Bath and Beyond in Westchester is closed down up there. So hopefully the one in Hopham will get a lot more business. It needs to look nice. Anyway, thank you.
Vice Chairperson Ashanable is absent. Commissioner Ortiz?
Yes.
Commissioner Caraveo?
Yes.
And Commissioner Richard?
Yes.
Motion passes 4-0.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Sure. Items to place on future agendas. Pre-agenda for the meeting on June 16th, 2021, mixed use ordinance. And now we'll move to commissioner reports. Any of the commissioners have anything they'd like to say?
I did just want to take this time to ask that question. I was kind of wondering, what does it look like for won't say applicants, but business owners, people who don't, because we get a lot of people who come and say, hey, I didn't know that I had to come to planning commission because I needed to paint something, or hey, I didn't know I had to do this. Is it, do they receive some kind of literature, or is it like did code enforcement happen to drive past their house? It was like, hey, you can't do that. Like, how do they end up here?
You know, but I think a lot of it is, you know, reactive. Code enforcement is out there and they see something happening, or a neighbor or a fellow business, you know, makes mention that, hey, we believe some construction is going on, and we don't think they have permits. A lot of that happens. You know, going through Title 17, our zoning code and building, code, there's a lot of requirements. And, you know, there's a lot of information that, you know, in order to find out, you have to go through the code or call building and safety or call planning to find out. And I think most of that happens. I mean, we're inundated with phone calls all day long. And a lot of them is, you know, I'd like to do this. What do I need to do? Sometimes it's, oh, yeah, permit's not required. You're fine. Sometimes it's, yes, there is a process. You need to submit a plan. Sometimes you need to pull permits. So I think it's just a combination of everything. I think the internet has made the information more widely available, but it still takes some sort of basic, I guess, knowledge that I'm doing something. I wonder if there's something I need to follow, and then make a phone call. Your developers, you know, especially ones like painters for commercial buildings, doing tenant improvements, commercial buildings, anyone who does development on commercial buildings and has been around a while doing residential, they know. They know that there's codes they need to follow. And even, you know, we get simple calls as we're putting an air conditioning unit. These installers know, hey, what are the restrictions on putting in an air conditioning unit in a residential unit? So I think a lot of times what happens is, you know, homeowners or the business owner will do it themselves, and they themselves may not know. And maybe that's what happened with the last one that we saw here.
Okay. Well, that makes sense. And then I also just, now that you mentioned that, kind of a follow-up, when something like that happens, an applicant who didn't know or was just didn't know they were supposed to do that, aren't assessed any kind of fines or fees or anything like that for moving forward if they say did something and then, oh well, I didn't know, they can come back and get their approval unless they're kind of egregious with it, or they're like, well, you told me and I don't care. Then it's a problem, right?
Yeah, and I believe with this applicant, there was no citation.
Yeah.
It was just told there was a process to follow.
No citation.
Okay. Well, thank you. And then just for a report, I want to say thank you to everyone who's watching. Thank you to you guys. Mostly thank you to staff and the other commissioners here. Like, I know this was a long meeting and we get into some really like pointed technical questions. Main reason I just want to explain, main reasons I ask so many questions now is because we all here, specifically us, we get used to doing these things. So there's a lot of like assumed knowledge that comes when people use terms or say how things specifically work, and they make sense to the people who are sitting here having these conversations all the time. But a lot of the public who write in or talk about these things don't always have that like background knowledge to really understand why we're doing things the way that we're doing it. So just to make the meetings more accessible, I like to ask the questions so people can kind of understand what all is going on, what goes into those questions. And I thank you all for just kind of like bearing with us all to do that, because it really does I think it really makes a difference.
Okay, thank you very much. And I want to thank everybody that is commissioners that made it here tonight. And Maria, if you could do me a favor sometime tomorrow when you have a moment, give me a call and I have a couple of questions I'd like to ask. You're hard to get sometimes. Okay.
Yeah.
There isn't anything further from commissioners, and these meetings are adjourned.
I had wanted to say something. I just want to hope everybody had a happy holiday weekend, and I want to thank all the military service people, personnel, for their service. And that's it.
Okay, thank you. So this meeting is.
I think Melissa's trying to say something, but she's on mute.
Melissa?
No wonder everyone was ignoring me. Thank you. No, I just wanted to say one quick thing because Art sent it to me after the fact, and I can't help myself as an attorney. I just want to read to you what that section of the law says about adverse impacts. under density bonus law, I can't help myself, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
It says, and I did thank you, Art, for getting it because it's such a dense law. I didn't think I was going to be able to get it fast enough to be able to listen and get your questions answered. So anyhow, as used in this paragraph, it's called a specific adverse impact, means a significant, quantifiable, direct, and unavoidable impact based on objective, identified, written public health or safety standards, policies, or conditions as they existed on the date the application was deemed complete. That's what you would have to find. So if the legislature was trying to make it more obvious that they really want to make it difficult, look at how many adjectives they use, right? It has to be significant, quantifiable, direct, and unavoidable impacts that affect health and safety. So that's what's actually in density bonus law. It's Government Code Section 65589.5. I forgot what subsection it is, but it's in there. That's all I wanted to add, but that's what the language actually says.
Please, more legalese. Bring more legalese.
You know what you're asking for.
I enjoy, as I'm sure we've come to from these. I enjoy the legalese. I think it's fun. This is also why I'm a very, the uneventful person here who likes these things. But whatever, it's fun times.
I could read laws all day long. So
my favorite.
As long as I can get them fast, or I can get somebody to pull it up for me, I'm happy to read it.
There we go.
Okay, I hate to break it up, but
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Goodbye, everyone.
Everyone have a
Thank
good
you.
night.
Good night.
Bye.